Yes, Doug McKelvin in for McGraw Millhaven. Steve Roberts, ABC News political analyst, joins us this morning. Steve, good Monday to you. How are you?
Good to talk to you, Doug.
Things going to be nice and shiny and clean in the Capitol building, as they always are after they get a weekend, a little bit of cleaning up. But compared to what happened on Friday with the American Health Care Act, it's going to be tough for the Republicans to pick up the pieces and move forward in any number of areas. And it looks like the White House is still trying to figure out exactly what's going on as well. So what are you hearing?
Well, look, Doug, there's nothing new about the fractures in the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. Let's remember that the Freedom Party, this Freedom Caucus, 30 to 40 very conservative members, basically forced out the previous speaker, John Boehner. They forced him to retire because it was so difficult to cobble together a majority. And what Paul Ryan, Boehner's speaker, is learning, as speaker successor is learning, as Ryan himself said, it's much easier to be the party of no than the party of yes. You can be unified around saying, I hate Hillary Clinton, I hate Obamacare, make America great again, build a wall. These are all slogans. They don't require details. They don't require legislation. But when you actually have to produce something like a health care bill, which affects 1/6 of the American economy, far, far, far more complicated than sloganeering or campaigning. And the single biggest problem Republicans have is this group of conservatives are not interested in being part of a governing majority. They're interested in holding up a purist flag, and they have strong support in conservative talk radio. They have strong financial support from people like the Koch brothers. They are in very conservative districts, so they don't have to worry about being defeated. And it's very difficult to deal with them. But governing requires compromise. And it's very difficult to put together a majority if you have a group of folks for whom compromise is a dirty word. It's betrayal. It's treason. Very difficult.
Steve, 7 years is the number that's bandied about that the Republicans have had the opportunity to put anything together. Yet at the same time, I tend to think that a lot of this, what was presented or what they wanted to do, you have to wait until there's a new president in and figure out what he really wants to do at the same time. And as a result, they were on an incredibly tight timetable to try and get this thing done, burned an awful lot of political capital. Everything I've ever read says, if you're going to make a move and you're a brand new president, you want to do something big and major right after you get into the Oval Office, because you're going to burn a lot of capital and you want to be able to, start saving it back up again. What does this mean for the Trump administration, and are they going to circle back around on this, and if so, when?
Well, look, there are a lot of mistakes, and there are a lot of people to blame. Start with the fact that it's not just the conservative Freedom Caucus to blame here. President Trump has never been interested in the details of legislation. He was very good at mouthing these slogans, make America great again, repeal and replace Obamacare. But he came into office with virtually no conception of what that meant in terms of legislation. This is not a man who's ever been concerned with policy. It's not a man who's ever served in a legislature. It's not a man who has ever gone beyond that kind of sloganeering. So his White House was unprepared for this battle. And so was the Republican leadership in the House with Speaker Paul Ryan. They put together this bill very hastily, and they didn't do the groundwork that's necessary. This is an enormously important and complex piece of legislation that affects 1/6 of the American economy. And yet they put it together in a slapdash way. Doctors were against it. Hospitals were against it. Disease groups like Parkinson's and cancer were deeply against it. The nurses were against it. On the eve of the vote, Quinnipiac polling company did a poll, showed only 17% of the American public was for this bill. So, yeah, the biggest fault here certainly is with the Freedom Caucus that is unwilling to negotiate or compromise. But there's a lot of other blame to go around as well.
You think about it, as you mentioned, the Freedom Caucus, they're very entrenched in their ways. Yet at the same time, you look at the president, and in my heart of hearts, I see a man who operates businesses and makes deals in a business-like fashion. And that's not the way Congress works. And it's almost as if
Not even close.
Yeah, the light bulb hasn't gone on yet. Who, if anybody, can go to the president and say, okay, you just learned a lesson here. This is not the way Congress works. And if you want to do this, you're going to have to parlay. You can't just make some extravagant claim and then back off of it. And that's the point that you really want to get, is when you back off. Who
Well,
can
look,
talk
the president has, the president has prided himself as the master of the deal. And in the days going up to this vote, his White House staff was euphoric. He's the closer. He's the master negotiator. Now you see why you elect him as president. It turns out that negotiating a political deal and a legislative deal, very, very different from negotiating a business deal. If you read everything Trump ever said about negotiation, he always said you have to be ready to walk away from a deal. Well, in business, you can always do that. There's always another business to buy. There's always another building to build. There's always another group of investors who want to deal with you. That's not true in Congress. It's a very, very different negotiating atmosphere. And I think the president has been deluded into thinking that because he was a successful businessman, he could apply the same strategies. He even said at one point, this is just like negotiating a business deal. Wrong. It's not even close to being like negotiating a business deal, because in a business deal, everybody around the table has a vested interest in pleasing you. They want your contracts, they want your money, they want your business, and he can look around the room and say you're fired. You can't say you're fired to the members of the Freedom Caucus. You can't say you're fired to the Democrats. Each one of them has been elected on his own and her own constituency, platforms, interests. So he's finding that applying business methods to Congress just does not work. And I think for the good of the country, hopefully he will learn. But the notion that he might now bring in Democrats is also going to be very difficult. This is a man who campaigned so adamantly against Democrats.
Steve Roberts, we've got to run, but thank you very much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Steve Roberts, ABC News political analyst at 7:59, Time Saver Traffic, sponsored by St. Louis Closet Company.